What is going on, everybody? Welcome on in to Inside the Browns Beat. I'm Mike. He is Fred, and this is the OBR Streaming Network, the best, oldest, largest independent Browns coverage site in all of Cleveland. The OBR is your home for everything Cleveland Browns, and boy, do we have a big, big night planned for you here on Inside the Browns Beat. Fred and I are going to chat for a little while as we get you ready for week one of the NFL season. The Browns and Bengals just days away after a long, long offseason. It's time for real NFL football, and we're going to have you all ready. And then at 7:30, we are bringing in a Hall of Famer at this point, somebody that just went in, that just accepted the Bill Nunn Memorial Award. Mary Kay Cabot is going to join us to get you ready for everything Cleveland Browns. We're so glad you're here. If you're having a good time with us, jump in the conversation, whether you're watching us on YouTube or Twitch or wherever you're at. Jump in, have a great time with us. We'll try to get some questions up from the crowd. So make sure, especially around 7:30 when Mary Kay gets here, get active in the chat, and we will pull you in. Fred, we made it. We made it. We're here. The last week of the offseason, the last few days and hours of the offseason. It's finally time for football.
Thank goodness. I mean, when you're 3-14, covering a 3-14, it seems like it's been years since they last played a game or a meaningful game. I mean, after about 6-7 weeks last year, the regular season, it was just really playing out the string once they were 1-6. So, yeah, I'm excited. I mean, it's hope springs eternal. You start fresh. You never know how it's going to go. You follow the Browns wave. They've been up and like every other year. This could be a bounce back year. I mean, they go to the playoffs and then you have high expectations. Seems like they drop down. Then they come back up. Then they drop down. Well, maybe they'll come back up. But yeah, it's always exciting to get the season started and just see, the reality of what they put together. And I think there's a lot of storylines, this season, a lot of storylines to talk about, a lot of what ifs.
Yeah, Fred, and kind of just to lead things off on our side of things here before we get to Mary Kay at 7:30. But if we wind this thing all the way back and we think about where we ended last year with Bailey Zappi and the Cleveland Browns just mercifully ending just a horrendous season, especially offensively, just a terrible offensive season where clearly the Ken Dorsey situation didn't work with Kevin Stefanski. And you take it back to the beginning of the offseason. Remember, it wasn't that long ago, Fred, that we had Myles Garrett doing a press tour on Radio Row at the Super Bowl, demanding his trade from the Cleveland Browns. And man, we've had a lot of low times. We've had 0-31, and we've had the Hugh Jackson experience. We've had the Johnny Manziel experience, which I hesitate to even bring it up because he won't shut up about Cleveland. But it really felt like about the lowest of the low points, Fred, didn't it? When Myles Garrett was at the Super Bowl on national TV everywhere asking for his trade, I was wondering how we were going to come back from that.
Yeah, that was, I mean, you're like, are you kidding me? Right before free agency, you're coming out with this. You're torpedoing any chance to bring in players, like instead of recruiting them, they're saying, well, then I'm not going there. In fact, you had some of your best players here, like Denzel Ward, saying, well, wherever Myles goes, I'll see what he does. And he wasn't going to get traded. He knew that, and they would have paid him. I don't think his motivation was pay, but obviously he got paid. But as far as I do think he wants to win, but there's a much better way to do that than what he did. But yeah, here we are now, what 6 months, 7 months later. and he's all on board and he's ready to go. We'll see. He said he's going to lead. He's had some incidents recently, with the speeding, so he does his best talk on the field, and he's done his best talk against the Bengals with Joe Burrow. And so I'm anxious to see how he gets out of the gate, especially with this revamped defensive line.
And he is going to have help. And like you said, the revamped line, you know, I think that's the other big storyline coming into this season before we get to like quarterback situation and all that, which is the most talked about storyline. But it's the youth of this team and it's the youth of this roster. And it starts, Fred, with the rookies that they drafted. I know it's been a much talked about thing. The undrafted rookies that are not only making this team, but are probably going to be looked upon to be impact players for this team. But the kids that they drafted, especially defensively, when you look at this defense, and we've talked about it ad nauseum on this show, and what this defense is going to have to do in order to make the Browns a competitive football team this year. And you look at adding Mason Graham, and you look at adding Carson Schlesinger into the middle of that defense, Fred, it was very apparent that the Cleveland Browns thought and felt and knew that the interior of the defense was something they needed to address, and they went for it. Those are guys that can just have, and I think a lot of people probably should expect them to have a really immediate impact on this defense from day one.
They need that. And as you mentioned, it was intentional because as bad as the offense was, dead last in the NFL, 15.2 points a game last year. And everybody's thinking, you got to get all offense. Their first two picks were on defense, Mason Graham and Carson Schlesinger. And that shows you they felt the quickest path to being relevant is get the defense back on top in the top 10. You're already a little behind the 8 ball, losing JOK for this season. Then Jordan Hicks retires at the start of training camp. So you lost your top 2 linebackers from a year ago. And then you lose Martin Emerson early in training camp. So really you had 3 starters gone on defense before you even got to the regular season. That's why it's so incumbent on Mason Graham and Schlesinger to make an impact. And so far, so good. I know it's preseason training camp, but they've looked good. They've looked like they're going to, fit the bill. Schlesinger's been a tackling machine, and that's the whole idea. They have to improve their run stopping. They gave up 129 yards a game on the ground last year, and those big guys up front, Malik Collins, Graham, can plug up some holes, and 49's been going and getting the ball carrier, and that's what they're going to need. And then Graham, to get that penetration and to free up Myles Garrett and Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire and Malik Collins. I just think that that's the pathway to being relevant this year and having a chance to be effective on defense.
Before we continue with the Cleveland Browns, I do want to give a shout out. I know I was putting them all up on the screen before, and I think Ian called it out in the chat, but over on the Twitch side of things, I do want to give a shout out to our buddy Pat Shea. 10 gifted subs right from the rip on this show. Huge shout out to you, Pat Shea. Great friend of the OBR. And shout out to you for bringing more people in to the OBR and gifting out all those subscriptions over there on Twitch. Big time shout out to Pat Shea for doing that. Yeah, Fred, I mean, it's been an area of the team that we've talked about as far as I think everybody that's going to talk about the Browns and whether or not they can have any modicum of success is going to center that conversation around, well, the defense has to be great. But the defense needs help. And it's the offensive side of the ball that needs to help the defense. It needs to keep the defense off the field a little bit. We need to not have Myles Garrett looking like the most insanely in shape human being on the planet, looking like he's gassed in the third and fourth quarter of pretty much every game that he plays in. These guys defensively, they need to get a little bit of a break, and that's going to start on the other side of the ball. So, Fred, when you look at this offseason, again, the draft didn't quite go the way people thought it was going to go, in that a lot of people, like you said, thought they were going to go offense all the time in the first couple rounds of the draft. They didn't do that. They eventually did end up addressing offense. 2 running backs, one of which we will see on. Harold Fannin, Dylan Sampson, these guys are going to be there. Quarterbacks, obviously, they addressed. But there were other areas where people really thought they were going to hammer home, and that's not quite the route the Browns took, right? Like, They didn't really hammer home anything in the wide receiver room, especially with any kind of proven talent. But it feels like they feel like going into this season with the return of the real Kevin Stefanski offense and Joe Flacco under center is going to make a humongous difference. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean they need the steady hand, and that's where Joe Flacco comes in. He's been there, done it. If you've been watching this, I've been writing and saying this. I don't care what they said about Kenny Pickett. It was Joe Flacco. That made the most sense when you, especially when they saw the schedule come out. I don't know, they never say that, but those first 6 games, 5 playoff teams they're playing, a combined record of 71-31. Why wouldn't you want somebody that's been there, done that, to at least get the season started? There's plenty of season if it goes off the rails to see other players. And so that was the game plan. Play good defense, upgrade the defense, but get a steady hand at quarterback and just run the ball. Under Kevin Stefanski, they had one of the best running games in the NFL. Obviously, you had Nick Chubb, but you still have your line, and you have an experienced line in that wide zone scheme, and that's what you're relying on. There was no question what they were doing. They got Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson. They were overhauling and getting younger, and at the expense of Nick Chubb, to go all in with those guys. Right now, you're without Judkins. You don't know how long, he's going to not be here. I mean, to me, that's a big blow because you're going to have a running back by committee, basically what you had in the last couple years after Chubb got hurt. And so they need to stay afloat, but they need to have some type of running game so they can use the play action pass, keep the defense off the field. And that was obviously the game plan. I don't know if it's all goes awry without Judkins, but it sure puts a big blow, into it, especially these first 6 games when you're playing some of the best teams in the NFL, the best defenses. You wanted a punishing big back that could handle the ball and do so. So that's where they're at. I think Flacco, I don't expect him to do what he did at the end of 2023. He just has to play average and veteranly and not turn the ball over and just keep the chains moving. And, he throws a great ball. He still looks like everything's still, going there with the arm and so forth. I just think the experience factor will really help steady this team. You got 12 rookies on this roster and 13 when Judkins gets here. And to have a 40-year-old veteran in the room, in the huddle, I think that's the steady hand at the wheel.
You talked a lot about the running situation and Kevin Stefanski's affinity for running the ball, and obviously, Jerome Ford has proven to be a very capable back. We don't really know what Dylan Sampson's going to look like in the NFL, but we are talking about the reigning SEC Offensive Player of the Year in Dylan Sampson. Obviously, they bring in Raheem Rocket Sanders, who is a rookie, but got cut after the draft. But, you think about the offensive line, and I think one thing we were talking about early in camp is we kind of look backwards. One thing that we were talking about early in camp, and I'd love to hear your assessment of it, just as you watched camp unfold and as you watched these guys out there. But I remember one of the big stories early in camp was the shape that DeJuan Jones came into camp in, right? You kind of know what you're going to get out of your veteran guys, the Tellers and the Posiks and Joel Bitonio and Jack Conklin. You've got these incredible 4 veterans on that offensive line. But then to see DeJuan Jones coming off of an injury, who looks to be in like the best shape he has been in a long, long time. Talk to me about just kind of the noticeable things that you saw out of DeJuan Jones throughout camp, whether it's the shape that he's in, his mobility, and just how he looks ready to roll going into this season.
Well, I think the biggest thing, is his want to, his attitude, because you don't get looking like that when you were 375 pounds, unless you have the willpower, the motivation, to to make to make the necessary changes in order to do that. Obviously, there's a lot of motivation and money to be a left tackle in the NFL, especially going into your third year. And I really have been impressed with his attitude and his willingness to take on. He said, I much rather play right tackle, but I'm more than willing to learn and do what the team wants me and learning left tackle. He only played 3 games last year at left tackle before he got hurt. So it's going to still be a learning curve. But I think if they have any semblance of success with him at left tackle, that bodes well long term, because I think he's 23, might have just turned 24, but he's very young. Either way, I think you have the long-term answer at one of your tackles. If he doesn't last long-term at left tackle, he can flip over to right tackle where he's more comfortable when Conklin moves on. And so I just think that he's going to be a work in progress, but I have to feel that he's going to be an upgrade over Jedrick Wills. And I know a lot of people are going, oh, well, that wouldn't take much. But he did play 4 years at left tackle for the Browns. And so I think DeWand right out the gate, since he got his feet wet a little bit last year, I think he'll be okay. I mean, he's going to go against Trey Hendrickson in the first game. But I think the silver lining here, Mike, is he's went against Myles Garrett every day in practice and training camp. And Myles and him have talked time and time again about what to look for, what to do. And you can't get a better experience than going against Myles Garrett. I would think just about everybody you go up against would be pretty much on par or less than what Myles Garrett is. I mean, yeah, TJ Watt, Micah Parsons,
Hendrickson,
Trey Hendrickson are going to be there, but I think that's a great workout for him every day, and so I'm excited to see how he bodes.
Fred, it does feel like, and I think the offensive line is a tremendous example of this, but it does feel like this offseason was a clear indication of the Browns realizing that they needed to address depth as much as anything on this team. And, it maybe doesn't lead to the most flashy signings in the offseason. I know a lot of people wanted another number 1 type wide receiver coming in, and they're still very much hamstrung by salary cap issues. But when you look at depth around the team, it just felt like that was really a primary focus for them. And again, you look at the offensive line, and one of the areas of concern on the offensive line are these guys that are getting a little older, Bitonio and Conklin and Teller. Are they going to be able to we've already seen Posick go out with an injury in the preseason. Are they going to be able to make it through a season? And the Browns went ahead and really kind of addressed 2 levels of the offensive line, right? Because you brought in a lot of Cornelius Lucas and Tevin Jenkins and KT Leviston, and you got a couple of young guys in Whippler and Zinter out there. It really felt like that was the theme of this offseason for the Cleveland Browns, was really making a deeper team in general, right?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. Is because last year, if you remember, the 3 tackles all were going into the offseason coming off knee or different surgeries, and they thought they'd be ready for training camp for sure at the beginning of the season. And you actually were DeJuan Jones started the season, but Jack Conklin and Jed Wills didn't, and they kind of got caught. And so here's the other side: is 4 of the 5 starters, they're 30 and over, but they're all in the final year of their contract, and they're all making a lot of money. And so they have to not only play for now, but play also for next year, because they might decide, depending on how the season goes, to move on from all 4 of them and go with the younger guys. They feel good about Luke Whippler to be in a center. They feel pretty good about Zach Zinter. He had a rookie tough year coming off the broken leg, but he's got a big year in front of him. Cornelius Lucas is that 12-year veteran that's like been a starter he can play left and right tackle. Tevin Jenkins was like the third highest rated free agent guard. I think the biggest reason he was available in free agency was because of his health issues. But so far he's been okay. And so, yeah, you have across the board, and you made a trade at the end of the cut downs to get Leviston, a guy they like, another tackle. So they do have two deep on the offensive line behind those starters. And so I think they've tried to, prepare themselves. But the biggest question with the veteran offensive line in the wide zone is health. Like I said last year, it just seemed like the last couple years, injuries just kept coming, and it hurt them on the offensive line. If that group can stay together, going back to the wide zone, I know Batonio and Conklin both talked about being excited to get back into it. It's one of the things Batonio, why I think he came back. And Conklin, at the season ending talk with him, he said, we're excited to get back to what we were brought here to do, to play this wide zone. So I know Chubb was great, but I think that offensive line created a push, and I think they can run the ball. I think Jerome Ford's proven he can run the ball. Last year they couldn't run the ball because they went away. They went to a pass-first offense.
So, Fred, I know you have recently talked and heard from a couple of the kind of leadership type players in some of the areas on this team that people have concerns about. I know recently heard from Jerry Jeudy. You talked to Jerry Jeudy about that wide receiver room. So just kind of fill us in on what you heard from Jerry Jeudy, a guy coming off a career year, a guy who really had to prove it last year. And man, did he prove it, that he can be a number one style wide receiver. What are his thoughts on this wide receiver room going into this season?
Well, I actually talked to him today in the locker room, because anybody that asks me about the Browns wide receivers, or I hear people talking, it's Jerry Jeudy and what else?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the reasons I thought Deontay Johnson would make the team, because at least he was a Pro Bowler and he has had a resume. Maybe not in recent years, but they decided to go with almost all unproven young wide receivers. I mean, I like Cedric Tillman a lot, but he had a 3-game stretch. He showed the most potential. Jamari Thrash did absolutely nothing. 3 catches last year, 5th-round pick. They got him listed as a starter, as the third receiver. Gage Lavardane made the team as an undrafted rookie. Great potential. DeAndre Carter is a return guy. I think he caught 16 passes last year. And when you look at that all the way around, it doesn't give you a lot of confidence. Isaiah Bond, you picked up, a couple weeks ago. That would be the closest to a draft choice, because we all know he was going to be a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick. They gave him guaranteed money. So here you have really all unproven. So I said, Jerry, you're with those guys every day. Is that a fair assessment, or what do you see that it's not just you and a bunch of no-names? And he said, I see them every day. I feel, kind of didn't use the word under the radar, but that these guys can play when they're given the opportunity. He's very confident they're not only going to take the pressure off him, but take pressure off the offense in large, Joe Flacco and so forth. We'll see. I mean, but he's around them every day, and I would think, at his level, he knows what you need to do and be able to gauge that. I also asked Denzel Ward, kind of the same thing. You lost Martin Emerson. You got you and Greg Newsome, who had a rough year last year. I mean, besides you two, what do you got with Miles Harden and Cameron Mitchell and the guy they picked up at the final, Jarek Bernard Converse, and guys on the practice squad? And he goes, he likes the room. Now, I understand they're not going to throw their teammates under the bus, but he feels confident enough. In fact, the Bengals are going to have wide receivers. So you're going to probably see Mitchell or Harden out there, to start the game or early, unless Jim Schwartz brings in an extra safety to be that slot guy. So I'm just curious. To me, those are areas of concern, and their top two players at those positions felt pretty good about it. Take it for what it's worth.
No, and I think that's a great point. And the wide receivers are just going to turn out the way they are. I do think in the context of this offense, you can't talk about the receivers without throwing the tight ends in as well in Fannin and Njoku, because if Jerry Jeudy is going to go off, you've got a great opportunity with two stud tight ends who are going to be on the field a lot to make a big impact in the passing game. So even if Gage Lavardane or some of the other Isaiah Bond maybe doesn't pan out or whatever, you still have two big time tight ends that are going to come out and make plays. And I kind of feel the same way, Fred. I am definitely concerned about the depth at cornerback. At the same time, you're still trotting, like, your top two corners, you're still trotting out Greg Newsome and Denzel Ward, one of the best in the game. And there's not a lot of teams in the NFL, Fred, that are just going to trot out at any given time three top-tier cornerbacks at any time, the way the Browns were kind of hoping to with Martin Emerson before he got hurt. So, I think what you've said, and I think what you've heard from these guys, I like that it feels like that's what is being said in the room, is like, yeah, all right, we are confident in these guys because we're not talking about a guy that's trying to replace Denzel Ward and be the number one guy. We've already got a number one guy and a number two guy. We need a guy to step up and be the number three guy. And I feel like if the leadership is there and they have guys like Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome to look up to, that should hopefully pull up one of these other guys to really make an impact on the defense.
Well, it is, and as we know, Denzel Ward is, he's a little fragile. Greg Newsome has showed he was dinged up last year. He's coming off kind of a down year. And so that's where the depth comes in. I mean, you have, we saw Mike Ford way too often last year and Tony Brown because they were down to special teams guys. So that's where, it's incumbent for Ward, Newsome to cover the receivers enough. But don't worry so much about sticking your head and making tackles and getting hurt. Knock the ball down, cover the guy. And that's why it goes back to the defensive line. If they can put the rush on and get to the quarterback really quick and him get rid of the ball before he wants to, it'll make that secondary look so much better.
Hey, I do want to throw out, because we are getting close to bringing in our special guest, Mary Kay Cabot. She'll be here in just a few minutes. But I do want to throw out, if you're not subscribed over at theobr.com, first of all, if you already are, we love you. Not only does the OBR give you the best Browns content, it's the oldest and largest independent Browns site in all of Cleveland, but it's also a community over there as well, with the boards, with the Ask the Insiders and the water cooler and all that stuff. It is a great, great Browns community that happens at theobr.com. If you are not a subscriber, I would recommend that maybe you get over to theobr.com and subscribe, as they are running a 75% off subscription right now. So if you get over there and you do your VIP subscription, you get 75% off. That's an amazing deal to get you all the best inside information from guys just like my co-host here, Fred Greetham, who, it all happens there. It all happens there. So if you're not subscribed, get over there, hit subscribe, 75% off the VIP subscription. And make sure you're tuned in. Make sure you're tuned in. Fred, as we await our special guest here, Mary Kay, just hit me with some things out of camp, as far as maybe guys that we haven't talked about yet that you thought had an awesome camp. Or on the other side of that token, Fred, because we all get worked up. We see these guys in the preseason games, especially the young guys, and we get really excited about them. But maybe a guy or two that you think, hey, that guy probably needs a little bit more time. Let's pump the brakes on how excited we all are and give this guy a little time to develop.
Well, there's several, as far as Obviously, Gage, Lavardane, you get excited about. It's a different once the season gets started, and I think they'll be slow to acclimate him. But I mean, those top two picks on defense, I mean, has been advertised. I think Schlesinger, I voted as the MVP of the rookies because he was making some splash plays. I mean, it's tough to make eye-popping plays at defensive tackle. You're more of a blocker eater, so to say, and maybe a play here or there. But they both, I think, will have an impact to begin with. Um, you look at haven't seen enough of Isaiah Bond, but I think they brought him in at the expense of other players because they see his speed and what he can do for the offense. Um, I just think when you got 12, 13 rookies, this is the Browns are trying to thread the needle, with being competitive, but transitioning with younger players at positions on the roster. You still got Pro Bowl talent on the team, but you have to also replenish, and so that's where they're at, all the way around, and so I'm intrigued with a couple of the guys on defense. Donovan McMillan showed some
Yes.
things. He made the team. Obviously, he's undrafted, and so all these guys undrafted had to really stick out at the expense of a veteran player. But the rookies, Harold Fannin, I think, Kevin Stefanski was asked about him today. You brought up a good point in the wide receiver room. I think he's a wild card that they can use as a receiver. And of course, Aiden Huntington, he made the team during as an undrafted kid because he's willing to do anything. He's going to play fullback. He's going to play defensive tackle, defensive end. I think they're going to use him all over the place. He's got that attitude. So you like to see the hungriness in those young guys. And there has been some that have popped. Now they take it to a new level. You hear when you talk to players, the difference between preseason to the regular season is night and day. We'll just see who is overwhelmed and who's not.
Well, Fred, you talked about it being a little transitional period, and it's a good time for us to transition here on the show because our special guest is waiting in the wings. And this is not a special guest you just leave waiting in the wings. This is, along with you, Fred, one of the longest tenured Cleveland Browns beat reporters and a new Hall of Famer, recipient of the Bill Nunn Memorial Award. You see her on the screen right here. We can't wait to have a conversation with her. Welcome on in, Mary Kay Cabot.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
So it looks like you're like all of us now. We're in the regular season, long days, a lot of things as we make the transition. I wanted to just kind of congratulate you. I have personally, but to our audience for your award and your work and dedication. Can you share a little bit about your existence down at the Hall of Fame when that award took place? And you got I don't know if you're going to go into stand up in your next career, but from what I saw, you had the biggest applause and laugh meter going on there, talking about our days when I was right there with you with Bill Belichick and how he handled the media and so forth. So share a couple of the stories, maybe start with your induction.
Well, first of all, thank you guys very much for that. I really appreciate it. And it was quite a weekend. It was so thrilling and so exciting, so much fun. Now, I didn't spend as much time down there as a lot of writers who win the Bill Nunn Award do, because they come in from out of town and they get squired around in limos and all that kind of stuff. And I really just came down from Cleveland, and I was in the middle of covering the team. So I was right back at practice the next day instead of being in the parade and all that kind of stuff. And I don't really regret that. I wanted to continue doing my job. The Browns were in the throes of a quarterback competition. And so I just wanted to, get back and continue to do my job. But it was amazing to be down there for the Gold Jacket dinner. They really do treat you like royalty down there. And so here I was in the middle of covering training camp, and these are 10-hour days for us, 11-hour days for us. And, and we don't complain because, of course, we're grateful to have these jobs. And, we know how lucky we are. But I was in the middle of covering the Browns, and I didn't really have all that much time to write this speech. And I was kind of agonizing over it a little bit. And I knew I had to get to it. And my mom, who is 93 years old, she just always has the best advice for me, always has the best advice for me to this day. And she just said, don't overthink it. You're overthinking it. Just be yourself and just speak from the heart. And so that's what I did. And initially, they told me that I might have probably about 4 or 5 minutes or something like that, maybe 5 minutes to do this speech. And I thought I could squeeze it into that amount of time, but I think it ended up being maybe 9 minutes, maybe 10. But I really felt like I had a message that I wanted to share. And it was a message of this journey and blazing a trail and really trying to stay in the game and make sure that once I literally kicked the door open to go into a locker room for the first time, that I was going to try to keep that door open and then also try to pull so many other fantastic women through that door after me. And there were some that came before me, but most came after me. And I just wanted to set the tone. And I knew that if I was going to do this, that I wanted to not just kind of get by. I wanted to make my mark. I wanted to play big. And I really wanted to just have the kind of career that I dreamed about. And also, once again, as I mentioned, blaze a trail to show other women that they could do it to at this level. And so that's the message that I wanted to convey in my speech. And also the family part of it. That was so big to me, about the family part of this whole thing. I have 3 children. I have an amazing husband, and they were all part of my journey in a big, huge way. And so I wanted to get that message across that, that this was a team effort on the part of the family. We made sacrifices. I had a wonderful 3-year offer at one point after I had my 3rd child from ESPN to come and work on the TV side. It was an amazing offer. And my husband said, we can do this. We can make it work. Let's, if this is what you want to do, let's try it. And I just, I had an 8-month-old baby at the time, and I just didn't feel like I could do that. I just didn't feel like I was going to be able to all of a sudden be flying to this city and then from that city to the next city. And it just felt like it was going to be too much to do right by my 3 children. And they are my heart. They are my world. And so I told stories of how my husband would pack up the 3 kids sometimes in 3 car seats and take them to church on Sunday morning when I was away at the Browns game. But he faithfully did that with them. And so it was partially a speech about the family and about my husband just supporting me through all of this, and my kids dealing with every crazy thing that we had to go through as a family. But they were all there with me that night, and that was so important to me to have them there. But when it came to the joke,
oh boy.
so this is part of the story. So I was talking about how, if you can cover Bill Belichick, I mean, it's all going to be smooth sailing after that, right? I mean, nothing can be tougher than that. Fred knows this firsthand. He knows what we all went through. He knows what I went through in trying to do that. And so, yeah, Bill gave us the business back then, right, Fred?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So he knows all about that. And so, we kind of trauma bonded as a beat writing corps over what it was like to try to ask a question, get an answer, and all those kinds of things. So I was talking about how difficult it was. Well, my daughter, my 24-year-old daughter, she lives in New York City. She's in marketing, but she's also dabbling in stand-up comedy. And she's just got a tremendous sense of humor. She's so funny. And so she talked me into delivering my speech to her. She really wanted to hear it, even though I wanted it to kind of be a surprise to my family members. She was like, no, I want to hear it. And so I delivered it for her a couple of times. And I said, do you think I should do the Belichick joke? And she said, oh my gosh, absolutely 100%. She said, it will kill, is what she said. And that, in the comedy world, that's the vernacular that they use. And she said, it will kill. And so I was like, all right, I guess I'll do it. I wasn't sure if I should do it in that setting. Should I be a little bit more reverent and take things a little bit more seriously? The hall can be a bit buttoned up. But I thought, you know what? I listened to my mom, and she said, be yourself, be yourself. And myself is the person who would deliver that joke, who would write that joke and deliver that joke. So I had to do it. And somehow I pulled it off. I used a teleprompter that night. I've never used a teleprompter before. I do a lot of television. I've never used a teleprompter. I'm always the guest on Channel 3. I never have to worry about the teleprompter. I wasn't sure if I wanted to use it. But as I was looking down at my notes and trying to deliver the speech, then all of a sudden I looked up, and there were these beautiful words on this glass screen. And I was like, I'm just going to go for it. And I locked my eyes onto the teleprompter, and I never took them up, even though there were two teleprompters that you could go back and forth. So you were making sure that you were looking at both sides of the room. I was like, no, I'm sorry about you people over there. But even though my family was over on the left side too, I was like, no. I'm just looking straight at this teleprompter. I am not taking my eyes off this side. And I think that really relaxed me, and it helped me be able to deliver the joke with just exactly what it needed. And as my daughter predicted, it killed. I did not know, of course. I thought I was just crazy me, speaking to this group in this room. I certainly did not expect or anticipate that the joke was going to go viral. How I did not realize that, I don't know. I'm in the media. I have social media. I use social media. I know what goes viral. But I was just thinking, oh, I'm just delivering this to, my little family over there, and, the people in this room in Canton. And it took off, of course. And even now, everywhere I go, people talk about the joke, and I've done some radio shows about it and stuff like that. So I'm glad I did it. It was all in good fun. It was a joke. It was just a joke.
Mary Kay, I speak for all of us that have been following your work forever when I say my jaw is still on the floor upstairs from when I watched you deliver that joke. That was incredible. What I got to know, though, for a minute here is, did you ever hear anything? I know he's busy. Did you ever hear anything from the Belichick camp after that? Did you ever get one last scolding from Bill Belichick after this?
No, I did not. Someone mentioned that his girlfriend, I don't know, liked something. I have no idea what the reaction was. I really don't know what the reaction was, but I really truly hope. I mean, he had a sense of humor back in the day. I hope that if he heard of the joke, that he thought it was funny, because it was just supposed to be funny. And I was just trying to have a little bit of fun with that. So hopefully no one took it too seriously, and it was not meant, no harm meant in any way whatsoever. It was just supposed to be a little bit of good-hearted fun. And for all the hard times that he gave us, I figured, he could take one little joke from me.
Yeah, I mean, we had some times. I never thought he was going to go on. A lot of us, I don't think, thought he was going to go on to, the career he had with the Patriots and so forth. But yeah, those were the days we talked about with Scott, a week or so ago, that, and the stories we have went through are just unbelievable. And, things that you just wouldn't believe, some things we can't really even talk about, but that's been quite the experience. So thanks for sharing, that. Thanks again with coming. We'll talk a little football here. You wrote today, we talked to Joe Flacco on Cleveland.com, as well as the Plain Dealer. You talked about him. What do you think your assessment is now going into the season with Joe at the helm?
Well, I really think that the Browns were kind of excited about having either Kenny Pickett or Dylan Gabriel start the season for them. I think they were really thinking that Kenny was going to be the one to be their bridge quarterback, and that maybe at some point Dylan would take over, which is how I think it was supposed to happen, or going to happen. And lo and behold, Kenny pulls the hamstring, and that just threw a monkey wrench into everything. He wasn't going to be ready to start the season. And Joe, he earned it, but he won that job in part because Kenny got injured, and basically had to bow out of this four-way quarterback competition. That's just the reality of the situation. The Browns would never really talk about it like that, I don't think. But that's really the way that I see it. And so now I think that the situation is still fluid, because I think they wanted to do some different things with this offense, with Tommy Rees helping to run the show and with Bill Musgrave working with the quarterbacks. I think they wanted to do some different things and use a fuller, more robust part of their playbook where they could get in some of the running, some of the keepers, some of the RPOs, some of the designed runs and things like that, that they're not necessarily going to be able to do with Joe. But Joe brings his own set of strengths, of course. We know what they are. He's got the big arm. He's got the experience. He's going to play fast. He can read anything that you throw at him. So he's got all of those great things about him. But he does have some limitations right now, just in terms of the mobility and all that kind of thing. So if he can't get the job done, then I think they will turn it over to Dylan Gabriel sooner than later. They want to see what these rookies can do. And if it becomes apparent that Joe isn't necessarily going to be able to take them to the playoffs, then I think they're going to want to see what Dylan can do. They really like this young man. Now, having said that, if Joe goes out there and he's winning football games and he's scoring points and he's throwing touchdown passes and they're in the hunt, then you can't take him out. You have to let it run its course. There's no way you can turn to Myles Garrett or Denzel Ward or any of your veterans, Joel Bitonio, Jack Conklin, David Njoku, and say, oh, we're just going to turn this over to the rookie. The only way that you do that is if Joe isn't getting the job done. And he knows that this is probably one of his last chances, perhaps his last chance to start a season for a football team. And he is going to have to be dragged out of there with a team of wild horses. So Joe's going to give you his absolute best effort. And I hope it works out for him, for Browns fans' sake, and for the sake of the Browns, and for Joe and all the wonderful guys on this football team.
Yeah, I don't know when they had a change of heart. Obviously, they went and got Pickett first, and Joe sat around as a free agent until almost the draft, and then they decided to get him. I don't know if it was because the schedule come out or what it was that made them, prompted them looking at those first 6 games. It just makes sense to me to have the veteran. If you're going to tell Denzel Ward, Myles, and the ones you just mentioned that you're trying to win, he makes the most sense. He's the most easily also to be benched. He's 40 years old. He's not the future. So if things go off the rails, you can turn to the young guys and see. But if things are going well, hey, everybody's happy. You're winning. So I think it's kind of win-win. You know, I don't know if that's how it'll play out, but that's, to me, just makes the most sense. And so when you look at, you know, some of the storylines, do you have any read on what's going on with the Sean Judkins deal? I mean, I don't get this.
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I think there are different factors at play here. I think you, first of all, have Quinshawn and the agent side. Then you have the NFL side of it. They are still conducting an investigation and trying to figure out what happened here. And sometimes that takes time. I mean, you want to be talking to the alleged victim, even though the charges were dropped. They take these things very seriously. So they conduct a very thorough investigation. You have to be talking to Quinshawn. And then you've got the Browns and what their goals and needs are. So there are different entities. There's probably the NFLPA could be involved as well. So you have a lot of moving parts in this situation, and there could be sort of back channel negotiations or talks going on to make sure that everybody is getting what they need in this situation and that it works out for everyone. That's just my guess. Nobody has really told me that that is exactly how it's going. The only thing that I have known for sure is that the league has been conducting this investigation, and as of about a week ago or so, they were still doing so. And you know, there are guarantees involved that, you know, maybe on the agent side they want to make sure that they're getting as much guaranteed money as possible. It's a complicated situation, and I actually thought that we would have some movement or some news on it by today as we head into Bengals week, but so far it's been radio silence.
Yeah, it just seemed like there was no question what their plan was to go back the wide zone, overhaul the running back room with two young guys, even pushing Nick Chubb, away. That Judkins was the big, a big piece of the whole puzzle. And I don't know, especially these 6 games, how much that's going to derail them. And you look at Mike Hall's rookie year, you just feel like when Judkins does get in here, maybe running back can make a quicker impact, but his season could really be derailed in a big way. And I just think that was a big plan. Now you're kind of going back to the committee approach, seeing how, they're going to do there. But what are your biggest concerns heading into the season, as far as looking at the roster?
Well, I think one thing to look at might be, they're into their cornerback depth a little bit, and that will be tested right out of the gate on Sunday afternoon. Obviously, 43 touchdown passes for Joe Burrow last year. You've got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Losivas coming in here. And so I think that is going to be a real true test for these guys just to see where they are in that defensive secondary. It's an opportunity for Greg Newsome to step up back into that starting role that he wanted. I talked to him at the Super Bowl in January, and he wanted to be back at outside corner. And I asked him, do you want to sign an extension? And he said, I do, but I also want to talk to the Browns about my role. I want more playing time again. Last year, his playing time was cut significantly because he was the slot corner. Martin Emerson and Denzel were the 2 outside corners, and Greg wasn't loving his role. Now, he's in the last year of his contract, so I think this is kind of a big deal for him. It's an opportunity for him to go out and prove himself and show that he does deserve to have this kind of starting outside role and that he can handle it. What a better way to test yourself than against these receivers. And there will be times where he will draw Jamar Chase. We've seen that happen in the past. So I think that's one area to look at. And then you have to look at DeJuan Jones, and that's a tough position to play left tackle. And if they identify, if teams and defensive coordinators identify that you have even the slightest weakness anywhere, they will try to attack it. So let's see how the NFL is feeling about DeJuan Jones. Let's see how DeJuan Jones is doing in terms of stepping up into this new role at left tackle. It's going to be very interesting. And then the role might change if Dylan Gabriel gets put in there because he's a left-handed quarterback. So that kind of changes the dynamics a little bit as well. But, right out of the gate, he's got Trey Hendrickson, who had 35 sacks in the last 2 seasons. That's 4.5 more than anybody else in the NFL. I'm actually kind of amazed that he has kind of been overlooked for NFL Defensive Player of the Year because he's really good. And he's been tremendous just in terms of his time, to get to the quarterback and those kinds of things. So I think that's an area to look at. I think, I would have to say I'm curious to see how the receiving core goes. Now, they are not going to be playing 3 wides as much as they did last year. They're back to a lot of 12 personnel, and they look at those tight ends as an extension of their receiving core. Harold Fannin, big receiver as much as he is a tight end. So you can look at the pass catching core globally in terms of wide receivers and tight ends. And if you look at it that way, then I think you can feel really good about it. But if you just look at the receiving core per se, there are some unknowns there. You don't really know yet how Sed is going to bounce back from missing 6 games with a concussion. You don't know how Jamari Thrash is going to fare in stepping up into a larger role if he gets a chance to play some. You don't know how Isaiah Bond is going to come out of college and go into what could be a pretty significant role right away because of his speed. So I think that's another area to kind of look at.
Jump in here. You got some questions.
Yeah, Mary Kay, I had one loaded in the chamber here, and then all of a sudden I got a great question in the comments, and I want to get it to one of our watchers here, one of our viewers, because no fan base loves a good kicker conversation like the Cleveland Browns fan base loves a kicker conversation. So obviously the Browns moved on from Dustin Hopkins. Our buddy MC Lawrence in the comments on YouTube wants to know your opinion on our new kicker. I think is it Schmidt? I think it's pronounced Schmidt, right?
Yes.
Did I nail this?
Andre Schmidt. That's right. I do think that that is another one of those unknowns. And until you're standing in Huntington Bank Field, and maybe not even on a beautiful Sunday afternoon in September, but until you're standing in there, when there are 4 different seasons that happen in the course of one football game, and you have to deal with wind and hail and rain and snow and all those kinds of things. We won't know for a while how Andre is going to do, but they have a lot of confidence in him. He's very confident in himself, and he had a really nice preseason. He kicked that game winner in a clutch situation against the Rams. That was really good. That shows he might have some ice in his veins there. So good for him with that. And it just seems like they really did have to make that change. They had to do something because Dustin did not demonstrate that he had been able to shake out of his slump. So we'll see how this goes, but certainly you don't want to have to be worrying about that aspect of your football team if you're getting in the end zone.
Mary Kay, Fred, the question that I had for you both is you'd be hard pressed to put together 2 back-to-back seasons where you felt like you were watching completely different football teams than the Cleveland Browns of 2023 and then the Cleveland Browns of 2024. So as we approach 2025, when you look at how things are constructed and when you look at the coaching philosophy and what they appear to be kind of getting back to, do you feel like going into the season, the Cleveland Browns of 2025 remind you more of the 2023 team or the 2024 team?
Well, they definitely remind me more of the 2023 team in the way that it is constructed and how they will, again, be returning to more of the power running game and the 2 tight end sets and all those kinds of things. But I really want to emphasize this about the beginning of last season. It's something that a lot of people do not want to hear, but I'm not bashful about talking about it anyways. I think there were numerous things that went wrong in the first 6 games of last season. Everybody wants to blame the whole entire thing on Deshaun Watson. It wasn't all Deshaun Watson's fault. There were tackle issues. They had injured tackles. Their tackles were not ready for the season, and that was exploited by defensive coordinators. They did not have David Njoku healthy in the early going of the season. They did not have Nick Chubb in the early part of the season. None of these guys practiced together in training camp. They never were able to be healthy enough to actually put it out on the grass in training camp and rep it over and over and over. And then I also don't think Deshaun was healthy. I don't think that his shoulder was really 100% ready to go early on. He did not have that much practice time in 11-on-11s, and I just don't really think he was all that ready. So you couple that with throwing a brand new offensive scheme in there that they hadn't really practiced much. It was just a recipe for disaster from minute one. And like I said, a lot of people want to put that whole entire disaster on Deshaun's plate, but I think there was plenty to go around, and there were a lot of reasons for that. But most of those things have cleared up heading into this season. David Njoku's healthy. They fixed their running game for the most part, except for they don't have Quinshawn, of course. And I think that is a mild concern. Their tackles are healthy, although you have to see how DeWan is going to do. But some of the things that contributed to that horrible start last year, some of those things have rectified themselves.
So I'm going to do one quick follow-up, and then I'll let Fred kind of take us home here. But I'm going to ask you a motivation question, Mary Kay, so I don't want you to feel like I'm coming at you here. But I think a lot of people probably have this question, and I want to hear this straight from you. It feels like when we get into conversations with kind of the Browns brass and we hear these press conferences and all that, you are not afraid to ask the question about Deshaun Watson, and it feels like that comes up fairly frequently. And so I think the question that a lot of people have for you is the motivation behind the questions about Deshaun Watson because you maybe are hearing things or feel like there's a chance that we could see this guy out on the football field again? Or is it just trying to be as thorough and in-depth as far as looking at the situation as a whole as possible?
Well, I think you have to, when you're covering a football team, you have to look around and see what's going on. And when I look around, I see that they have not put Deshaun Watson on the shelf for the whole entire season. And then I see him in the field house throwing the football and doing agility work and dropping back and doing all these kinds of things. And then I see them trading Kenny Pickett. And sometimes I have to wonder, did you feel like perhaps maybe at some point in November that you would have that backup veteran if you needed to go to that well? And so every single time I've asked anybody in this organization, do you think Deshaun Watson will ever play football for you again? The standard answer is always, let's get him healthy first and then see. And he's not healthy just yet. I would say that maybe at some point in late October, mid-November, he might be ready to go. And it begs the question. And I have to ask the question. If nobody else is going to ask the question, that's okay. It is a little bit of, not a little bit, it's a hot button issue. We all know that. But these questions have to be asked. I never mind having to be the one to ask a question like that, because we would be remiss if we didn't ask it. He's right in front of our noses. He's right there in the field house working out. In Carolina, he was right on the field with the players. He's been working with Dylan Gabriel. He's been working with Shedeur Sanders. The Browns have positive messaging coming out about him. They say good things about him now. Kevin Stefanski says good things. Andrew says good things. So I think we would not be doing our jobs if we didn't ask the questions.
Kind of as we wrap up here, as we are going into the season now, the Browns are an under the radar team, obviously, for being 3-14. Do you see a pathway? Can the defense carry them, make them relevant? What is a pathway you can see for them to be in the hunt, so to say, for a playoff berth late in the year, or be relevant?
Well, the pathway is good, clean quarterback play. If you can get decent quarterback play without the interceptions, let's say Joe goes out, and because he's being protected well, and because that they will try to run the ball and support him with a running game, even though they don't have Quinshon, they still have enough guys by committee to get the job done, I think. And because he does have some decent weapons in Jerry and Said, and now again, the ones that we've mentioned, David and Harold, who looks good. If Joe can go out there and be the good Joe that we saw in 2023 and throw a bunch of touchdown passes, and exploit those one-on-one matchups and hit those deep balls and stay away from the interceptions, then I do see a world in which they can score some points and maybe keep pace with the team, coupled with a very opportunistic, aggressive, and take away forcing defense. You're going to need that. You're going to need your linebackers like Carson, and you're going to need your safeties and your cornerbacks to force some fumbles and to get some of those interceptions. You can't be losing the turnover battle. The Browns threw an NFL high 23 interceptions last year. They finished last in the NFL at -22. That's the pathway, that you don't lose the turnover battle every single week. So if they can stay away from that and they can punch it out a little bit and get their hands on some footballs, that's the way that you do this. It can level the playing field. You don't have to be the most talented football team in the NFL if you can win the turnover battle week to week, or at least stay even sometimes, or just not lose it every single week. So I think that's huge. That was just a disaster all of last season. So good, clean quarterback play, some good takeaways by the defense, run the football, and you might be able to stay in the hunt longer than people think you will.
Well, thanks so much. I know you're still in the media room, so you're burning the midnight oil there. So thanks again for joining us, and Mike, wrap things up.
Oh, Mary Kay, I was just going to say, big time thank you. Unless you did a phenomenal job of decorating your own home to look just like the facility in Berea, go home and get a little sleep, get a little rest, because regular season time is here. And no, not many people have done it longer than the two people that I'm very lucky to share a screen here with on this show. Mary Kay, from the very beginning of having you on, awesome time. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, massive congratulations to you on the Bill Nunn Memorial Award, the Hall of Fame honors. And whether it's you, whether it's Fred, we are very, very lucky to have some great reporters that we're getting to know here on a weekly basis on our show here on Inside the Browns Beat. But hopefully you're able to find a little bit of time for yourself. You're not surrounded by those orange chairs all the time anymore, and have a great time covering yet another season of Browns football. We can't wait to watch you do it.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for having me, guys. It was a lot of fun, and I love the concept here, and I really enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks, Mary Kay. We'll talk to you soon.
See you tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good.
I love how you end all of our conversations with "see you tomorrow." It's just like, I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be there. Mary Kay looks like she's just going to be there until tomorrow.
She probably is. She's puts in a lot of time.
Fred, I wanted to ask this, but I didn't want to keep Mary Kay overly long, so I'm just going to ask you, as somebody that's done this for as long as you have, you go through training camp, you're out there, you're in Berea, you're watching the practices, you're watching the preseason. It's a lot of long days doing all that. As a beat reporter, how does life change when the regular season hits for you?
Well, I like it, in the preseason once they start playing games, because a lot of people don't know NFL mandates nothing the day before, nothing the day after, other than like a coach, giving now they do Zoom calls since COVID. So you get into a schedule, and then the mandatory Tuesdays are off. So you get a little more time to catch your breath. Training camp is 7 days a week. Obviously they have nowadays a day off every week where the players are off. But yeah, the media availability, is a Zoom call, usually Mondays. Tuesdays are off. Then Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are big days. Nothing Saturdays. And then the game's kind of like an all-day affair. But you get into a routine, a schedule. And you're not having to chart quarterback throws because you got 4 quarterbacks and all the shenanigans going on with the roster shuffles. And, now we only get to see 30 minutes of practice, which is stretching, and then basically doing one-on-one, throwing the ball to each other. They shoo us out of there once they go to practice. So you really can't report like you can in training camp. At least the Browns allow us to report during training camp practices. When we went to Carolina, none of that. They don't let their reporters report on anything in training camp, and they don't let the fans come. So, it seems like it's restrictive to some degree the way it used to be with the Browns. But, yeah, that's the biggest thing is the schedule tightens up, for all involved in the you just don't get as much access maybe as you do during training camp to see everything what's going on.
Got it. Well, that was a great little insight there to wrap up our show here on Inside the Browns Beat. That's going to do it for us. Couple little orders of business before we get out of here, as we are, again, just days away from the beginning of the Browns season. I do want to give a shameless promo. Mary Kay talked about blazing a trail, and that she has certainly done. She has certainly done. And one of the people that I'm sure would give a little credit up that way, as somebody who does a phenomenal job covering the Cleveland Browns, Cameron Justice is actually joining us on Garage Beers at 9:00. So in just under an hour, we're going to play the Browns schedule game with Cameron Justice to see how we think the Browns' entire season is going to go. You don't want to miss that. So just get right back here on Garage Beers at 9:00 here tonight. Big time shout out to Mary Kay Cabot again. Just awesome. Her stories were great. Her insights were great. Her conversation with you, Fred, again, kind of like we talked about, as you said, with Scott Petrak last week, kind of that trench crew. When you got to batten down the hatches and everybody else leaves because it's not fun to talk about the Browns anymore, there's a certain group that's still there. Mary Kay has been there for a long, long time. An honor to have her on, and we hope you enjoyed our conversation with her. Big time shout out to Mary Kay Cabot from Cleveland.com for coming on with us. Next week, do you want to announce next week's guest, Fred?
Yeah, we're going to have Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan. He also covers the I think he Locked On Browns podcast and Sports Illustrated Browns Digest. So Spencer's going to join us. He's excited. Talked to him today. So we got a lot of things lined up. We got some more guests lined up. So every week, tune in here at 7 and put up with me and Mike, and then we'll have somebody really exciting to talk to. We're trying to introduce a lot of the people that cover the team every day, to our fans and get their opinions and their insight. We'll be talking about what happened in the Bengals game.
Oh, I can't wait. We're going to actually talk about Browns football next week. And again, we're doing it with Spencer German. So make sure you're here next week, 7 p.m. for Inside the Browns Beat. That's going to do it. Again, get over to theobr.com and hit subscribe. If you haven't done it, 75% off of the VIP subscription for new subscribers. Make sure you get over and take advantage of that opportunity, and make sure you hit subscribe, follow, like on all the streaming services. Fred, it was a blast as always this week. Go follow Fred on the socials at Fred Greetham9. But that's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Browns Beat. For Fred, I am Mike. We will talk to you next week. Until then, as always, go Browns.
Thank you. Thanks for watching.